welcome back to Raven's Ramblings, Musings of a Southern Witch. I am your host, Raven. Thank y'all for joining me tonight on what I'm going to call a bonus episode. We are not going to go over any major teachings or lessons or anything like that. This is more of a y'all can kind of get to know me a little bit. Okay? I want to get to know y'all. I hope y'all want to get to know me. If not, well, shit, skip this episode and go to the next one. Learn something. Whatever. So I'm Raven Nightingale, if you want a full name. A certified weirdo and coffee addict. I work in healthcare mundanely, so I have a very healthy dose of dark humor and coffee addiction. I am married. I've been with my wife for a little over 25 years now. Now, we've only been married a lot shorter time, legalities and all that good stuff. But we've been together 25 years. We have 2 dogs and 2 cats, and right now a fish tank with some snails in it because she can't seem to decide what kind of fish she wants to put in it right now, which is fine. It's her thing, and whatever she wants to do, whatever makes her happy, we're gonna make it happen. So that's the basics about me. I'm full of sarcasm and trauma and like I said, a lot of damn dark humor. So if you're still with me, thanks. I can be a lot, but thank y'all for trying at least to go on this journey with me. I wanted to kind of talk to y'all and explain some of the things like from me growing up and how I got to the magical place that I'm at now. When I was really young, probably 7, 8, somewhere around there. So the early 80s, mid 80s, somewhere in there. I can remember being in bed and hearing things, hearing footsteps and things. So this was my very first conscious introduction into supernatural kind of things. My grandmother had passed a year or 2 before that. Now I lived with and was adopted by my mother's parents, so my grandparents. When my grandmother passed, I didn't really understand. I mean, I was 6 years old. So when I started hearing things at night, footsteps in our home, it scared me because I mean I was just a kid, so I didn't understand. And after a little while and still hearing them every night or every other night, if I remember correctly, I finally felt a sense of calm about it, and I never did tell my grandfather because I guess for lack of a better term, I thought I was crazy. Because who the hell hears footsteps out of nowhere at, 7 or 8 years old? But I think it was my grandmother walking around and checking in on us and all that. Now, another thing that I did around that same time was I started making what I look back on and go, well, hell, I was making potions and had no idea. So we lived on a farm. Okay, so we had chickens and things like that. We had laying hens that we would have to gather eggs and all that. So I would go and get like an old ice cream bucket and put leaves and flowers and crack an egg in it and stir it around and say whatever was on my mind at the time and would make potions. You can't see it, but I'm making the quotation marks for potions. And I don't know why, but that felt right to me. So that was one of the things I did. I know, super weird. Like, who the hell does that? That cracks an egg over, but whatever. It's not the point. The point is, I did weird things. When I was 10 or 12 years old, I got a little bit more freedom because, like I said, we lived in the country, so we couldn't drive, but we had three wheelers. This was the 80s, so times were a little bit more lenient. Kids were just let loose to do whatever. So we would ride three wheelers all over the parish. I mean, it's Louisiana. I live in the South, so we have parishes, not counties, down here. In case you were curious, that whole Napoleon Code thing. Anyway, it's not the point. I'm getting sidetracked. We would ride three wheelers all around and stuff, and I would go visit the cemetery that my grandmother was buried in. I felt very comfortable there. I felt very at peace there, and I would spend hours just sitting beside her grave or laying there and talking to her or just walking around the cemetery itself. I spent a ridiculous and probably not sane amount of time in cemeteries around this age because we had no supervision. We were just feral kids in the 80s. So there's another weird thing about me. Now, a year or two later, so probably 12 or 13-ish maybe, I can remember being at a friend's house, spending the night, and I slept in a sleeping bag on her floor, and she was in her bed. Now, this experience was my first truly uncomfortable experience because I didn't understand, and it really scared me at the time. I remember being asleep and something waking me up very suddenly, and the door to her room was open, and I was facing that door, and I remember looking at that door and seeing a tall shadow figure with what appeared to be red eyes. I don't know what it was. It didn't feel truly malevolent, but it didn't feel friendly either. So my scared ass hit the bottom of my sleeping bag and just curled up and hoped it would go away because I didn't understand. Now, all of these things so far were, early teen and younger. I was raised in a Baptist church. Nothing supernatural was okay. Nothing. Nothing. There were no ghosts. There was no magic. There was no nothing. Okay. Southern Baptist, very strict. Don't ask questions. Yeah. So, after that, I started, and I've always been a reader. I love to read. That's always been my escape from whatever was going on in my world. And just, honestly, just boredom. I will read. I love to read. So I started finding fictional books, anyway, about witches and stuff. One of my very first ones was The Witching Hour by Anne Rice. Now, that book is still one of my absolute all-time favorites. And at the time, once I found Anne Rice, I devoured everything Anne Rice because it opened up a whole new world for me into the supernatural, into magic. Even though it was fiction, it was still something because there were no metaphysical shops, there were no books like that kind of stuff in our little small town one room library for me to even know that these options were out there. So after reading books and stuff, fictional books about witches and yada yada, I became more intrigued, I guess, by ghosts and things like that and the supernatural. There was in 1995, I think it was, I just gotten out of high school, and there was this really old plantation type house in a town close to where I grew up. And it was left in disrepair, and there were all these different rumors and things about how the child and one of the parents had died, and the remaining parent had them put in glass top coffins and kept in the house for a little while, and then when that one died, they were all moved to the family cemetery across the street. And there were more details back then, but well, I'm getting old and I can't remember shit anymore. But that's the premise of it, and that cemetery is still there. You can't. I mean, you can go and look at it and stuff, but there's no glass top anything. Whatever. Not the point. The point is, a friend of mine and me were riding around bored one day during that summer and went, "Hey, why don't we go check out that house?" And just see if we can see in it, or, whatever. So we did. We parked on the side of the road and we walked through this big field, and it was, of course, all grown up and, just brush and stuff everywhere because it had been abandoned. And we got up to this house, and this huge porch up there still had the wicker furniture on it. We could look in the windows by the front of the house, and everything looked like it was still there. Like whoever had lived there had just walked away and nobody had touched it since. So we went around toward the back of the house and actually found a door that was open. And, I was still kid, technically. If you find an open door of an abandoned house, what are you gonna do? Well, you're gonna go in, of course. Well, that's what I did anyway. My friend didn't want to; she was scared. So I climbed in this house and I walked through this kitchen and was just kind of looking, and it really looked like someone had just left for work and just no one ever walked in again, kind of thing. Walked into the dining room and started to feel this extremely heaviness. Just, I felt like I couldn't breathe very well. I felt very weighted down and started to kind of break out in a cold sweat. And there were like these decorative plates up on the wall that started to rattle. And it was at that point I'm like, I should probably get the hell out of here. And then we left. Now, I've heard stories about this house for years, and actually my wife has a friend who went upstairs in this house but has never spoken about it because whatever it was just too much for her to deal with and stuff. And now this is, 30 years later, it's been remodeled. This house has been remodeled and turned into like a B&B, and they talk about how they hear footsteps and stuff in the home and all that. So it kind of validates the experiences that some of us had back in the day, that those things are still happening at this newly remodeled. And I think when they were doing their remodel, they even had even more issues because they were disturbing everything. So that is some of the main things from like my childhood. There were other little things here and there, but nothing as substantial as these things were to me, that I can, still remember them 30 and 40 years later. So right around that same time frame, around 1995, I made a friend. I moved from where I grew up about an hour away to where my mother lived and moved in with her. Whole tragic story behind that, all that nonsense from, the crap that happens when you're a teenager and trying to figure your world out and stuff. But anyway, I moved about an hour away and met a friend, and she was Wiccan. Now, that was my first true introduction into the craft, I guess you would say. She had lived quite a bit of time in LA, and that's where she had gotten into Wicca and stuff. And then she moved back here because she was originally from the South here. But she started telling me a few things, and the town I lived in had a college, and I actually went to their library and started looking things up because, colleges have huge libraries. They're not as, I don't want to say censored, but they do have more things than a very small Southern conservative religious library would have. So I found a book, I believe it was an encyclopedia of witchcraft or something. It wasn't Buckland's book or anything like that. It was like a true encyclopedia of different things about witchcraft throughout the ages. Like, kind of like the old Britannica. Okay, some of y'all are probably too young to remember that. But you could buy a set of encyclopedias instead of using Google. You had books, but that's not the point. The point is, between this friend who was Wiccan and, checking this book out at the college library, I started to realize there was more to things than what I had grown up in. I, like I said, grown up in a very Southern, very Baptist home and church and community. You as children, you're seen but not heard, and well, there's just more to it than that. And what I grew up in never really made a whole lot of sense to me. It just did not make sense. And then when you ask those questions of like your pastor or your youth director or whatever, a lot of times you kind of get shut down because they don't normally want to answer those questions. Not because they're always just upset of you questioning, they just don't know the answer. And nobody likes to not know the answer to a question they're being asked. Right? Makes them feel, I don't want to say stupid, that's not okay. But it doesn't make them feel good. So they're going to try to deflect and yada yada. That's neither here nor there. So this is how I got my first steps into what I call my craft. Because my craft is not Wiccan. It is not Celtic. It is my craft. I tailored it to what works for me, just as you should. And don't let anyone tell you you have to do it this particular way, because that ain't right and that ain't real. You do it your way. It's for you, not them. Getting sidetracked again. So, doing a little bit of research at that time was great. I learned a lot, but I was also with someone who did not understand and did not care to understand that I had this need to find this information and that it was important to me. Now, he and I are, of course, no longer together, but I had to keep things kind of secret at the time. The only thing I had, the biggest thing I think that freaked him out was I had a Ouija board at the time that I got from like Toys R Us or whatever, just trying to find anything connected to the supernatural, to witchcraft, to whatever, to figure it out, because I had so many questions. And he didn't like that in the house, so it eventually got thrown away and then somehow wound up in the trunk of my car. And the whole Ouija board thing where you can't get rid of it, it keeps coming back. I feel like that actually happened to me. And the last time I saw it, it was still in the trunk of that car when we sent that car to the shredder. And I have not seen that Ouija board since, which is fine because that's a whole nother. We'll do a spirit board episode one day. Not today. That's too much. So I didn't get to practice or learn as much as I wanted to in the late 90s because of my relationship at the time and because it still wasn't as mainstream as it is now. And it's still not mainstream, but it's more mainstream now than it was then. So I left that relationship and got into the relationship that I'm in now with my wife, who I absolutely adore and who puts up with my insanity better than anyone in my life ever has. Even if she doesn't understand it, she's like, all right, if it makes you happy, then that's what we're doing. And I will always love her for that. Because no matter how crazy it may seem, she encourages me. And that means a lot. So through the early 2000s, I practiced, but not to the degree that I am now. Still figuring my life out, trying to figure out where I fit in the world, all that kind of stuff. I did not go to college right after high school, so I worked with my wife for many years, which was absolutely amazing, and that is not something that every couple can do. It is really hard to work with your spouse, okay? Because that is a lot of together time that most people can't survive, but we did, and it was amazing. Now we still work in healthcare, but not together, which works out great for us. Luckily, we're both on night shift, so that does help with scheduling and stuff. Not the point. I'm getting ahead of myself. So, also in the late 90s, before I got with my wife, when I was still in that other relationship, there was a place here where I live now where there was a haunted school and there were all these rumors and stuff. So, of course, what do you do when you're in your late teens and early 20s? You in a small town, you get bored. Everybody loads up in a truck and goes and does stupid shit. So that's what we did. There was probably 5 or 6 of us and maybe even 7 or 8. I don't remember who all was there. But there were 2 vehicles. One was my truck. One was a friend's car. And we all loaded up and went to this school. And of course the rumors of Satanists and sacrifices and yada yada. Ghost and all the things, all the rumors for those abandoned places. So we park in front of the school and I'm like, I'm not going in there. It's 2 a.m. I don't feel right about this. It doesn't feel safe. Something is telling me I don't need to go in there. So me and another girl stayed in my truck while, the rest of them went into the school. Which was fine. Whatever. We just kind of hung out and we're talking, yada yada. Well, we all kept our headlights of the 2 vehicles pointed toward the school, so there would be a little bit of light for them to be able to see going in and moving around and stuff. So as me and this friend are talking, the headlights on my truck started to blink on and off, on and off, on and off. And of course, we were freaked the hell out. So I get out of the vehicle. I scream at the person I was with and told them to get their ass back to the vehicle. So they all come running. And finally, the lights stopped flickering and we all loaded up. And another friend was driving the other car. So we tell them what happened. They're like, all right, well, maybe we should leave. So we did. We all loaded up, we left, we're going down the road, and the headlights start flickering in my truck again. Away from the school, the headlights start flickering. Now, unbeknownst to us, because this was before everyone had cell phones and social media and all the things that we can't live without. This was before all that, so we had no idea that our friends in the car behind us were having issues too, where the speedometer was going crazy in the other car. Now we found out, once we got back to where we were going and all sat down and talked about it, but it freaked us all out. And we never went back, and I think that school's been fully demolished and stuff now, but this was just our side of that story. There are hundreds of stories about that particular school here locally, and with that was just our experience. So for the next 10 years after that, I didn't have a whole lot of supernatural things happen that I can recall. I'm sure there were little feelings here and there. I used to have a dream, a very particular dream, that I knew if I dreamed that dream, someone was going to pass. Now, I have not had that dream in years and years, but every time I had that dream, someone passed, whether it be someone from my family, a friend's family, some kind of an acquaintance. It was just a little bit freaky. Well, over the years, parents passed and grandparents passed, and I see a lot of now lookalikes to my grandfather, like all the time. He passed in 2011, and one of the things that he and I always shared was honeybees. We had honeybees growing up. So I would start seeing honeybees at just odd times of the year. In the middle of December, there would be a honeybee on the ground of a trail I was walking on or something. So there were little things like that. Me and my wife both smell perfume that we account to her mother. We smell just a lot. I smell tobacco for my grandfather. Just little supernatural things like that are just part of day-to-day life. We see it as them saying hello kind of thing. Now, I work in healthcare, so I work in a hospital. I see, and it's weird because I think the more in depth I get into my craft, the more I see supernatural things like shadow people. I see a lot of shadows at the hospital that I work at. We have most of our faucets in my department are automated. So you have to wave your hand in front of them to make them come on. Our faucets go on all the time. We have the automatic paper towel rollers that go off all the time out of nowhere. Some of our automatic doors will open and close on their own, and everybody's just kind of like, oh, well, that's probably so-and-so. That's the local ghost or whatever coming to check on patients and stuff. But it doesn't really freak anybody out anymore, I don't think. It may. Some of my coworkers are a little more ticky about things than me. I just usually say hey and go about my night. But I'm the weirdo, and they all know it. I think that's why they keep me around, just to see what the hell I'm going to say next. Because I'm a little bit different than my coworkers. But I keep them entertained, for sure. So that's just some of the stuff that led to me finding the craft and feeling at home in the craft. The craft is just energy. It's energy manipulation in a way. And I can see the effects of that. Therefore, logically, it makes sense to me. It doesn't do that for everybody. I know that. And I know my logic is different than somebody else's logic. But this is what makes sense to me. This is what brings me peace every day. I try really hard to be love and light. I do. I try. But some of these people be testing me. And that's why sometimes I operate in the gray. Because I cannot be all love and light with idiots. I just cannot. It is painful to me to deal with it. Because I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me sometimes how people don't see things. And that's a whole nother rant. We're not getting on that. So, coming to the close of this has been just like I said, a bonus episode, a little bit of stuff about me. I love all things spooky and creepy and weird and odd, and nobody hopefully will ever look at my Kindle Unlimited reading list. That's, something ever happens to me, I need to assign a friend to come clear that shit out so nobody ever sees it. I may get my friend from work to do that because she reads some stuff too. I may get her to sign in and delete my stuff. There's the old joke of, all right, if something happens, somebody go clear out my web browser. My web browser's fine, but my books, whoo, yeah. Thank y'all for joining me for this. I know it was a bunch of nonsense and just me rattling on about weird shit, but I appreciate it. Y'all have been a great peace of mind for me, being able to come on here and talk to everybody. So, other than listening to my episodes on Spotify, why don't you come check me out on Facebook? It's under Raven's Ramblings. I've got a page set up there. Follow me. I post little witch tips and just little happies and stuff. The full moon's coming up, so that's in 2 days, 1 day. 1 day, I think, because it's after, it's 4 a.m. Yeah, so tomorrow is our full moon for this month. It's the flower moon, so that's fabulous. Of course, May flowers. So find me on Facebook, follow me on there, and we can interact and stuff. I'm also on TikTok. I've put up a couple little cutesy videos and stuff. I'm Raven's Ramblings on there also. I'm on Instagram. It's under Raven's Ramblings Podcast. And I post up little cutesy crap on there too, because, it just makes me feel good. And in this day and age, I think we need to do more shit that makes us feel good and not be serious all the time. There's too much seriousness out there. We gotta relax a little bit. So, thanks for joining me. I hope y'all have a lovely, morning, I guess, now. For me, anyway. And I will see y'all next time. So, keep it magical. Bye.